In a remote town in Western Australia, Matthew and his daughter Shannon set to go on a fishing trip. Shannon is his only daughter. They live in a small town near the Great Victoria Desert, a place Matthew knows very well. Their plan is to go just 40 miles to a lake, camp the night and head back home. Matthew wants to make this trip an extra special one because he is leaving the town for a while. After a day of fishing, they camped for the night. The next morning they set to go back home. However, there is a problem. Matthew and Shannon haven't catched any fish. He doesn't want to disappoint her on their last trip together and thinks of another fishing spot nearby. They pack their stuff and head out deeper in the desert. The conditions at this place are unforgiving, with temperatures that can rise up to 50 degrees Celsius and drop to below zero at night. However, Matthew is confident he knows the place well and brought with him 20 liters of water, enough food and 3 spare tires. After 2 hours of driving, they still didn't see any sign of a lake. The rough terrain blew one of the tires. Changing a tire in this conditions is quite difficult. After fixing the tire, he felt confident they are close to the lake. Only a couple minutes later the second tire blew. This got Matthew frustrated, but he was determined to live up to his promise and they head out again in search of the lake. By late afternoon and 60 miles deep in the desert, Matthew felt nervous he lost his tracks. With only one spare tire left, Matthew decided to head back home. However, disaster struck again as yet another time a tire popped. Matthew knew that their only way out is with the 4x4 truck. It was at this moment that Shannon asked her dad if they are lost. He quietly replies, "Yes, sweetie." After driving for some time without any sense of navigation, the car got stuck and dark sets in. They had to camp for the night. Matthew felt very guilty as this was the night he had to bring Shannon back home. The next morning, he managed to get the truck out of the hole and felt like luck is in his favor again. After a brief celebration, they drove around looking for a track that will bring them back to civilization. A moment later, disaster struck again as the terrain blew up yet another tire. With no spare tires left, Matthew decides to deflate the tires in order to prevent them from blowing up. However, the deflated tires put a lot of pressure on the engine, resulting in the engine overheating. Matthew had to put some water in his coolant or the engine would blow up. After driving off, the engine didn't take long before overheating again. Matthew hesitated on putting yet another gallon of water in the radiator, but he knew that the truck is their only way out of this hell, and so he went on. After some time, smoke started to enter the cabin. Matthew screamed to his daughter to get out of the car, and as she ran away, Matthew managed to get some items out of the trunk as the fire was catching up fast. Matthew and Shannon watched as their only way and hope out was burning into ashes. With only a gallon of water in the outer part of the tent, more than 60 miles away of any civilization, their chances at survival were becoming very slim. At home, Shannon's mom had already informed the police. They launched a search and rescue mission, but still without success. After a cold night, Matthew knew that they have to move in the early morning before the sun and temperature rises. In the desert, the average person needs 1 liter of water an hour. With only one bottle left, the effects of dehydration were already showing on Shannon. Matthew suddenly sees something that looks like a mast in the distance and thinks maybe if he climbs that thing, he could get a signal to make an emergency call. After walking for 4 hours in the agonizing sun, they finally arrive at the pole. Matthew used his last energy to climb the pole, only to find out there is no signal. They have been living on sips of water for more than 3 days. The next day they woke up to the sound of a helicopter, and after waving and screaming loudly, they couldn't believe they haven't seen them. It was at this moment that Matthew thought he is more likely to be seen if he lights up a small fire. Within no time the wind turns and the fire starts raging towards them. They fled the scene, and with just a bit of food and no water left, they set out to camp for their 6th night in the cold desert. It has been a day since they had their last sip of water. This is quite dangerous for an adult, let alone a child. Matthew decided to go walk towards where the helicopter came from. Completely dehydrated, every step takes a tremendous toll on their bodies. Shannon has no energy left to walk, and Matthew cannot pick her up either. It has been 24 hours since Shannon had her last drop of water. That's where Matthew got a terrible idea to feed Shannon with his own blood, something he watched on TV. However, the knife was too bold and he could not do it. Matthew cannot sleep and tries everything to help out his daughter. He saw a light in middle of the night. It appeared to be a car. Matthew screams as loud as he can. However, the car didn't see them and headed out in a different direction. At home, Shannon's mom feared for the life of her daughter, and as she stared to the sky in hope of a miracle. Without any water for days, Shannon's organs start to shut down. Out of nowhere, Matthew sees a track. It must be where the car had driven last night. He followed this track but couldn't walk far. After 8 days of battling for his and his daughter's life, Matthew finally gave up. He digs a hole where he puts his daughter in to cover her from the blazing sun. It was at this moment that he realized he might have dug his own daughter's grave. As they were waiting for their death, Matthew heard the sound of a car driving towards them. He couldn't believe his eyes. After 8 days of suffering and the final moments awaiting their death, their ordeal is finally over. Shannon was rushed to the hospital. Doctors estimated that when Shannon was found she had only a couple hours to live. Shannon's mom was crying of joy when she saw her daughter. Shannon remained to have a good relationship with her dad, and they still go on camping trips together. However, Matthew has learned his lesson and does go far away into the wild and takes enough supplies with him to survive.